let's go back to the artwork here. So this is one of the top layers I've got, and I've used it here to basically to remove some of this detail. So what we're going to do is use that and then combine it with my blacks in this case. So I can turn off a lot of artwork and just see what's out the way and what I'm not using and what's not necessarily attached to anything. Great. Poster Pete. Okay, hey, thanks you guys. I'm just seeing if there's anyone else I know within the chat. That's brilliant. Okay, so if you look at my layers here, everything is I generally try and label stuff as I go along, just because it makes life easier when you're referring back to it, and if anyone else is having to look at your artwork, just makes life. So what we've got here with this layer is a few bats flying around, which are just outside, so we'll just turn those off for now. There's my signature, which is down here, so that's fine where it is. I don't need to like play around with that for now. I'll just turn that off. And what we've got here within my other groupings is this green one here is a bit of greenery. Then we've got the main stem for this particular plant. We've got the blue flowers in one layer, and then we've got the rest of the stem and leaves in this folder. So we'll take it one at a time, and let's fix what we have here. So this is a bit of an overlay, and we've got this dark layer here. So we don't need this necessarily here, I don't think. So that one we'll deal with that secondary one in a little while. Okay, so we'll work with what we have here, and that'll make life easier. There we go. We've got another dark layer. By all means, guys, like come with your questions, just because this is not always probably the most riveting thing to watch bit by bit. So if you have any screen printing questions or any artwork questions, by all means, just throw them in the chat. So great. Now we've got our dark layers together. So we've got two dark layers, which is basically being used to cover up some detail here. So we'll just combine these two together, because we only need one of them. One of the things we want to try and do is reduce the amount of layers that we have within the piece, especially if the layers have got the same properties as each other. So in this case they do. So we've combined those two, and we've got that out the way. We'll take that out the way for now, and we're going to work on what are our easiest points. See what else we have here that we don't need currently. Okay, we've got all our flowers, we've got this particular plant here, we've got some bats here in the back, and we've got this big white. So we're just going to work on the flower for now, because that's going to be the easiest part to play around with. So here's some dark, and we don't need that just yet. And here we've got more highlights. So I'm just going to label that as white, because that's something that we're not going to see, even though I've drawn over it in pen. It's going to be something that we don't see. It's going to be part of the paper afterwards. So we generally, when we're building up our screen print, we're building from lightest to darkest. So all these bits that I've drawn in white are just going to be paper. So I'll just label it. We'll turn it off for now. Here's another occasion of that. So that's there, that's labeled. Here's a mid-tone of blue, which is our number. This is our number 2 in this case, but it's on top of one of our darker layers. So we're going to create a mask out of this and knock it out of that other layer shortly. So here's the white. I'm just going to label that white instead of light. That's great. Then we've got our darker layer, which is all blue. This is our blue, which is our base. This is another layer of white. Let's label that out. Then we've got our dark blue, and then we've got our medium. That's fine. We've got another medium here, and then we've got our flower itself. So if you look at the layers, everything is clipped to this one layer, which is great for when you're actually doing the artwork, but it's not going to help us when we're doing the separations. When prepping for screen print, I'm just going to the chat. When prepping for screen print, do the colors have to be, one second, I'm just leaving here. Well, let's not do it that way. There you go, I can see the chat now. When you're prepping for screen printing, do the colors have to be specific types like Pantones? They can, It depends on the printer that you're working with. A lot of the printers I work with are happy to do Pantone matching for me, and I just go by from an RGB point of view. Some printers do specify can I have the Pantone references, especially if there's like a couple of variations. In a sense, it could be this one, it could be that, and they generally come back to me. But depending on the printer, you can just go with the RGB values and they'll be fine with that. Okay, so one of the big things we're going to do here is everything here has got a clipping mask on the base flower. We're going to remove that clipping mask, and so everything works at the same time. So I'm going to select all this so you can kind of see what happens when I deselect the clipping mask. So you insert, like I've been neat here, which is quite surprising, but you can notice in certain parts here we've gone over the lines and we don't need any of that ink and all that brushwork. So we're going to get, luckily we've got a very clean shape here, so we can just basically select outside of the shape here, and it's selected that small petal as well, and we can go into one by one and just delete everything that we don't need at this point. We're going to get into trapping later, and that's where you need these overflows in certain scenarios, but for right now we don't need any. So we're going to delete that, and that's made our life a lot easier because everything is working independently of each other now. So we've got our base blue, we've got our mid-level blue, which we've called it number 3 in our swatches, so I'm just going to call that number 3, and this blue can be number 2, just so when the printers look at it they are referring to the same thing. And then we've got our dark, which is our number 4. We've got white, which we're not going to end up using. Then we've got this blue, so let's turn this on. So this blue really needs to come away from this number 4. So what first thing we're going to do here, let's just set the value to this to black. Turn that layer on, layer effect, great. We're going to put a layer underneath that, and we're going to create a mask with this layer. So let's just select white. We're going to keep it available to us just in case we need it, so we'll just duplicate it as well. So here we go. So this is the first mask we're going to create because we want to minus something from the current artwork. So let's select these two and create a mask. So we've created a mask, so everything white you see, everything in black you don't see. So we select that and you click. So this is the layer we want to apply it to because we want to minus away from this one. So let's select it, let's add that mask, and now you see where we so if I zoom in there and I disable my mask, it brings all that things back which we painted over in a lighter color. But now when we apply a mask, it takes away exactly what we don't need in there. So that's perfect. Now the other thing is, if I bring that layer back, it's like, okay, that's fine, let's take that effect off. It was also taking it away from the layer below it, so we want to do the same thing to these number 3s as well. So not that particular, this one over here, we'll apply the same mask that we've got, and there you go, we've minused out of there as well, so when we apply this on top, we get it to be seen through. So that's a very easy, quick thing to do there. Great, so that's that. And then we'll end up doing the same here with our whites in a few minutes as well. So there's our mask. One thing I always do, which helps me, because you end up using masks sometimes several times, whenever I create a mask like this particular one, I'll throw it into a folder down the bottom, and I generally leave that for the printers just in case they need it to tweak anything. So I label that masks as well, and all my masks end up going into there. Great, so now let's carry on and get this flower done. Right, so we've got our dark layers, and we've got our number 4, that's great, we don't need to do anything with that. We've got 2 iterations of number 3, that's fine. One's got a mask applied to it, one doesn't. Then we've got our white. What goes above that? We don't need this layer anymore, in all honesty, but we'll keep it there, but we will end up deleting that one. We've got another layer of white, which is there. We've got another layer of white, and we've got the dark. We'll play with the dark later, but we've got these 3 layers of white now. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to create a mask, and everything's white there, so we'll do the opposite at this point. Now sometimes when you're doing this, what I've found, let me make everything white. Sometimes your detail can be very fine, and sometimes it can be too fine for the screen print. So sometimes I duplicate some of these layers just so they come through just how much I need. So I'm gonna duplicate this one and knock its opacity down by 50. So in theory we've got 100 and 150, just so we make sure that detail comes through. And now I'm going to create a mask out of this. So we shall create those and just flatten those into one thing. Let's reverse it out, and we're going to copy that, and we're going to first throw it onto here. There we go. So now we've seen we've done that, and we've removed that from our base blue. We also need to do the same thing here, just in case we've got any overlap. This one seems clean, but we might as well apply it. It's better to apply it than not have it, and we end up having areas which get covered up because of it. And probably the same scenario here. In this case, it's a case of, okay, I've already got a mask. So what do I do there? So it's like easy way to do it is you can create a third mask in a sense from the two that we already have. So we're gonna duplicate that previous mask just so we don't lose it. And here's our current mask. Here's the layer on top. We'll hit apply, and then we got two masks we've got a new mask now. So we'll select those and merge them into one. Great, so we've got that mask, and now we can pretty much apply that one. Not on the base blue, because we don't want that coming through, but we can apply it to here, and here, and here. And there we go, we've got our flower now. That's pretty much done. So we refer back to our first screenshot just to see if we've lost anything. Everything is matching up as it should, and I'm happy with that as that is from a screen print. Sometimes you'll see details, or you want to just slightly adjust things, so you can just go into your mask, select a brush. I'm just going to go into one of my brushes here. In this case, for this particular one, for this darker layer, I'm going to go into my mask and just take away a little more. So I've got black selected there, and I'm painting basically not actually on the layer but on the mask, so I can just remove a bit more paint here, just so we can get a bit more of that detail where I feel I'm losing a little. So it's just going in and cleaning up some of these lines just so that make sure they show up. Great, so we've got that flower is basically done. We don't need this layer now anymore, so I can delete that. We've got this white. We've got these two masks, which I'm going to throw into my masks folder. I just generally move it to the bottom, and then I'll throw them in there later. But there we go, they're out the way. So the thing you want to do is, like, by a certain point you want to have less and less layers, or every layer actually has a number to it, because now you've fixed it, it's got its corresponding value, and you're happy with where it's sitting. So this is our dark layer. So this particular one is done. And by doing that, the same thing, because I was working on the same layers here, everything's done here because this is quite a simple illustration of what it is. We haven't had to do multiple layers to do the same thing. So the two flower buds are all complete. So we're going to keep this dark layer for a little later and fix that in a little while. So we'll just move it outside of the flower. So everything within here is all our blues. So there's three values there which are all done. We'll keep this dark value just for now, and we can turn off the flower and then start working on the stem and leaves, which is a little more detailed in what it is. So this is going to be a little trickier, but nothing that we can't get done. See, if you look through now, I can see all the detail through my flower of all these petals and leaves. So we'll get rid of that shortly. So one thing that we will do while we're here, we're going to select that main flower, because I'll need it shortly. Turn off turn off that layer mask, and we're going to create this to be its own mask for when we knock it out of all the petals that we have. Color overlay, turn that to black. Black is what you don't see, white is what you do see in this scenario. There you go, we're going to end up using that mask shortly, so we'll have that there and handy. Turn that off for now. So layer order, the blue's going to be at all the blues that we have, they're going to be at the bottom. They'll be the first thing that's printed, and then all the greens and the dark blacks, they'll be printed on top of that. So let's select this layer. Okay, so let's keep that there. Let's have a look at what we got here now. So there's a few more layers within this one. There's another black there, which, yeah, we need that. We got a light. So these are the things we're going to end up knocking out. So this white layer here, we've got another one up here as well, which I had off. I'll need this one as well. And this green here, we're going to see, I made a few changes to my piece. So these two layers here aren't actually within the main grouping because I adjust it later on. So it's a pain, but it happens. So we're going to have to incorporate that into this before we start doing anything else. So let's see, we've got green and we've got white. So white shouldn't be a problem. That'll be the green that is causing us a little problem here. So it's the same thing that we did last time, really. We need to minus this out of some previous layers. So let's duplicate that. Let's turn that to black, add a layer of white underneath it. There we go. You can see exactly what we've drawn on this original layer that we need minusing out. Right, so let's create a mask. We've got our mask, and let's see all the layers that we need to apply it to. There's some dark, we don't need to do anything with that. And be everything here. So this is black. This is also black. There's our main bit of black there. So I'm going to turn this green off for now. Up here, but yes, because it's getting confusing otherwise. There we go. We just can see all the black that we need to apply it to. There we go, black. So there's black, that's black. That's all black. So is that, and that layer there. So how's it going through? Luckily, I've actually done some decent ordering on this, so there's not an awful lot of work to be doing. Kept in mind that this was going to be a screen print at some point, so it's reduced the amount of work that I'm going to do. So I'm going to select everything here and combine it into one layer, and now I'm going to apply that mask to that layer and remove all that detail that we want to bring back in. So this particular bit, we don't need any of this. This was going to be removed from that section. So that white detail here we will be removing. Let's see, let's go to chat. Are there any brushes packs that you would recommend at all, or do you create all your own? I use a lot of Kyle's brushes which come with Photoshop. I started using them before they were part of Photoshop, so I've got some which are probably in a way outdated, but I've played with them and tweaked them myself. But they're basically either Kyle's brushes or there's like a variation of those that I've tweaked myself. And then for the most part, it's just the standard Photoshop brushes that come with Photoshop as standard that you'll just see in your brush palette. But yeah, I recommend Kyle's just because they give the most like organic feel to what you're painting or drawing. Okay, so there's our light layer. We don't need to worry about that yet. We've got our dark layer. We've got a dark layer above that, but that sits above our flower, so we're going to work on that later. Here's our dark. So let's turn that off for now, just so it's less confusing. Here's our dark layer. Here's our base plant leaf layer. We've got, what have we got here? So sometimes you can't see what you're looking at, so I just press select on it just to see what we're working with. Here's another, and here we go. So we've got some bats here. I'm going to combine them into one layer, select a color, and just make sure they're all number 5 because they should be, and call them number 5. Great. And they're very simple because they're part of that piece. They don't need to be played around with. This is our main piece here. And what we've got missing is here, at some point I adjusted that leaf up there. So if I take that away, you'll see it looks like that. So at some point I adjusted that, so that's why this particular one actually has a layer mask already applied to it. We don't need that, so we want to turn that layer mask back on. We will then remove this clipping mask. Let's release clipping mask. We've got our base. And you'll see if I just turn this on, how everything kind of comes out of that base or a clipping mask that was attached to it, and you get all these like rough lines. That's the beauty of like working with masks and so forth. You don't need to see in that, and it's a lot like coloring within the lines. That all the effort. There you go. So we're going to create a quick mask and get rid of all that. So same thing that we've been doing. Masks really are a godsend when you're screen printing. You know, there's something previously that I've gotten rid of there, so that's probably also showing up. So something here is taking away from that. I'll fix that in a little while. There we go. So we've got white, we've got this. Let's make that black in this case, and let's select the 2. Great. So now we've got this as an entire piece. Anything on this filter? Ah, that's what it is. So over here, if I turn all in this stem, there was that. So something to select here, which was on the parent, I must have also deleted. So we're going to go to this layer here, disable that, and we'll get rid of it directly from the source, which is this. So let's just select a pen. Let's go in and just delete those extra prongs, just to make sure my flow is high enough. That's fine. Great. So we've got that. We're going to do the same thing for that. So let's just select that again. Let's select that, and then we'll delete it from here, because there's no need for it at this point. And while we're here, we might as well do it in one go. Just make sure that's clean. Yeah, we're great. So we've got our base stem, we've got our mask. Let's reverse our mask. Great. We've also got all these values here. Let's have a look at what we had in there. That's fine. In this case, we're just going to collapse those into one. I'm happy with that mask that we applied to it originally, so I don't mind losing it, and we always got it in backup if we need to. So we'll do the same thing here, and there we go. We've taken everything that we had that was falling outside the lines. It's now working independently of its base layer, and that's going to be all our dark values that sit on this particular stem that were sitting below our flower. So if I bring our flower back in, that's there, and then that's our layer below it. So one of the things we will end up doing now, let's get rid of our dark layer. Let's fix our stem. Our stem is fine in the sense from a color value point of view. We're just going to merge it because we don't need that mask that was applied to it while I was drawing anymore. But the thing that we do need to take away from there is this. So this flower shape that we have, we're going to apply that mask. And there you go. So now when I put my flower on, we don't get any of those dark values coming through that we had previously. And we've still got it with this black, but we're going to take that away. So we're going to merge that one in this case. If you don't want to keep merging, what you could do is put all like the layers within multiple folders, so you can apply a different mask on each one, and that allows you, so it's non-destructive. It's an easy way of doing it, but I know this piece quite well, so I don't have a problem with that. So make sure the layer's on when you merge, otherwise you lose everything. That's the only thing. So thank God for History Tool. So let's apply it here as well. So great. So now you can see how our plant sits here, and it sits perfectly there. And you can see we've got some values here. That is our plant that's sitting in the wrong place. So we're going to move our flower so it sits below all this greenery, because from a layer point of view, it's going to be printed first. So we need to make sure it works in that order as well. So light to dark always. In case you can break that rule, to be honest, and I do break it from time to time, but that's generally like my go-to in a sense. Great. Okay, are there any brush packs that you... Oh, it's the same question. Okay, just checking through. Okay, So here's a mask that we'll drop into this folder here. Get that out of my way. Here's some of our. So I'm going to apply this to number 5 here because we're overlapping here with a few of our bats, and we'll just get those out of the way. Brilliant. So we've got that layer, and we've got now got this white layer, and we've also probably got another one above that, which we'll play around with shortly. We've got this one as well. We'll play with that shortly. Let's move that out the way for now. There we go. There's a white, and there's white. So those are a lot of our highlights. And we'll just see, yeah, they're still in place where they need to be. We've got a green. No, we don't need that anymore. So where's our dark layer? Let's have a look. Right, so we had this layer sitting on top of our flower, which just gave us a bit of like, is it softer than everything else, but it gave us a bit of shadow work. So we can now, we're happy to place that above. That can be part of our blacks. Not everything needs to be one layer, to be honest, and I generally try not to do that. If it's, especially if it's like using different dithers, different ways, like this has got quite a harsh sort of tone, whereas this is a lot softer. So I like to keep those as separate things, so the printers can treat them differently when they actually turn this into a screen print file. Well, say a screen print file when they convert it directly to the screens. So that's black and black. That can be in one folder. That's all our blacks. This is our greens, and this is our greens again. That can be another folder. That's number 5. So once these folders start coming together, you know you're getting close to the finished print file. Okay, flowers there. That's great. Now there's got to be a layer here. There we go. That's what I was looking for, this particular one. So this is a lot of things that are sitting on top of our flower, which I drew in afterwards. So we're going to quickly fix these now that we've got a place to put them. Now looking at my orders, this is number 5. Number 5 sits on top of that, so I can very easily, if I wanted to, just leave that so it sits on top. And it's not going to break anything because it's going to be printed on top of that layer. But it's up to you, depending on how dark your colors are. You can cut away from the inside of this and leave a bit of trapping. But let's finish this off first. So we've got another light layer as well here, and it's all using, let's have a look. This is our base, which has also got a clipping mask. So let's just see what we've got here. Right, so if we turn this off, it would delete all that. So we'll just remove all this. I could do it with the mask, but it's quite straight line, so I don't need to really bother with that. So we can remove this clipping mask for now. But normally I'd do it with a mask. If I thought it was like very subtle in detail, I'd do all that work with a mask. So let's go back here. Let's type, this is a number 5. So let's take this out of our stems here. Let's put that there. And this is 5, so this should sit there. Great, that sits beneath that. And then this should fit on top. Now a couple of these elements are coming in too deep. So let's put these whites with the whites out the way. Lights is what I always do right at the end, because I can probably get away with just creating one mask to get them in place. So let's look at what these darks that we have here. Let's turn off this light as well. You don't need it showing just yet. It ends up confusing me occasionally. Let's see. Okay, so let's get these darks in place, and let's get rid of that as well. So this is number 5, and it's at the moment we've got elements that don't need to be there. So let's go here. It's this particular one which is being a pain. So we're just going to delete that from there. Then we can select these and bring these back in. Now that's not sitting 100%, so this is a great example of why you need to always have this snapshot here, which kind of helps you, okay, what's missing, what's not doing what it's supposed to. And if you can see, we're doubling up on things. There's a layer coming through that shouldn't, and I'm losing detail because of it. So we can go in and try and fix that now. So here's our darks, here's our darks. So I'm guessing it's come from, there's one of these base layers which we don't need, which is our green was covering up. So let's select this again, just select just those areas. Let's go back to our blacks. It's going to be these. So if I then take away from this and then turn these back on, there we go, that's a lot smoother in those areas. And what I can do just to clean that up just a little more, so there's a few elements still a little overlapping, so let's see which ones those are. It's this particular guy here. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to select a brush. I'm going to select the same brush I drew in for the most part, so it has the same texture, and I'm going to just take away from these items here. So I'm going to just turn this on. See, what I'm working on that layer, but what I can just do is take away from here and give it that same finish just to see where it's missing. Normally I wouldn't have this problem, but I did add this element afterwards, so I'm just tweaking around it and getting it back to what I need it to be as a value. There we go. There we go. We are happy with that. And same with this side. Yeah, we just need to remove a little from here. There's another layer below it. There we go. That's the layer that's causing a bit of trouble. So are we happy with that? So you have to go back and just tweak and, you know, assess the elements that you want to keep and ones that you don't. Move on there. So great, we're a lot happier now with that. That's back in place. Yeah, that's looking a lot closer to what we had. So there's just a couple of little things here. Just we go, that should be underneath then. It could be a case of this. So if we select this particular layer and take it away from here as well. No, not happy with doing that, apparently. Here we go. Oh, I need to select it from the stem itself. Select the stem, this layer here, and let's take away from there. We don't need that to be there. Nope. Take it away from there. Nope. This black layer is causing a bit of trouble. Great, so we've got this stem selected. Aha, that's why it's causing a bit of trouble. Okay. There we go. We just need to select this part of it and invert that, and then there we go. That's what we were missing beforehand. Now we've got that detail back. So, hi, a big fan. Thanks for sharing your process. Oh, no problem, no problem. It's one of those things. It's like you do it so often, and you get a lot of questions. So I thought this is probably the easiest way than explaining it, like over Twitter or what have you. So, and plus this is a new preset that's going to come out shortly. So it's a nice way to show this off as well. So great. Now we've got our 5s are in place from this point of view. So if you look at everything, that's fine. I'm happy with that. Our darks are in place. So a nice way of seeing it is that you can just turn stuff off the way it builds up. So let's see. So what's this layer here? We're going to fix that one later on. That's just a spare leaf I did later on. So let's turn everything off, and let's see the way it builds up. You should start seeing this is how the screen actually gets printed. So in this case, our lightest blue, then our next darker blue, and then same color, so that'll be one screen. Then we've got this darker layer, great, and then we've got our stem goes on top, and then our darker colors go in there. So you can see that's a lot of the work. Now what we still have to do is take away our highlights. We'll do that shortly. We can see that's a lot of what the work is. The other thing that we're going to do, we're going to fix right at the end, is trapping. So trapping is basically where two colors overlap to a degree, because screen prints in their very nature they're not like digital printing where they're generally pixel precise. So you can have your screen slightly not in the right place. So you always got to leave a couple of pixels breathing room for certain things, so they overlap in color. So even if a screen is slightly misaligned, then you don't get these white little trapping marks where there should have been color and there isn't. So that's something that we're going to do right towards the end. So we've got that one done. We're happy with that. Let's get this last stem done over here. I'm just double checking on my. Okay, so we've got this one as well, and it's very simple in what it is. So there's 3 layers in total, one of them being the highlights. Then we've got our blacks. Luckily I did everything in one go, but it looks like. And then we've got our stem right at the bottom. So we've got a mask here. So I've got this mask. So I'm going to apply it. So let's remove our clipping masks. And you can see everything falls outside of the lines. So we'll get rid of that first. Let's apply a mask because we want it, because it sits behind our main flower, and that's why I've got this mask here. So you don't see anything here. It cuts everything away from there. Otherwise you'd get this. Let's remove from there too. You'd get that where you don't need it to be. And to be honest, that can stay there. I don't need it. It's not a problem having it there, in all honesty, because it's going to back up directly to the other flower. This is where it's going to be a problem. So we'll do that shortly. But first, let's disable it here. Let's create this into a mask like we've done with our previous layers. Okay, so let's select white. Let's turn this layer into black. Brilliant. Let's create a mask out of that. Select our dark layer here. Here's a mask. Invert it so everything black is invisible, everything white you can see. Brilliant. Our highlights, we'll just do the same on that as well, just in case, so I don't have to worry about it falling outside the lines. Great, turn that off. Here's our layer of black. We'll just disable that. Now we've take that away. We don't need this. Let's select our black again, apply that mask, and now we've got that nice cutout where it flips on top of our other plant. There we go. Great. So there's our dark. So there's our black. So that can go with our blacks here. Put it in this folder. We don't need that. Here's our one stem, which is number 5. Here's our other one, which is also number 5. So I'm going to delete this layer mask just so it doesn't confuse anyone later on, or me. I just delete it. We don't apply it. Give it a number, which in this case is color number 5. Put that in the number 5 folder. Great, and that sits on top. So all this layer that had all our stems and everything else in there, here's a mask from before. Let's remove that, throw that into our mask folder. We don't need, we've finished with all those, so let's pull that out of all these previous masks. Hopefully we haven't broken anything, which is always the fun thing to find out. We don't need that, we don't need that, so I'm just going to move that out the way, right towards the end, underneath our paper layer, because I know that's going to be something we don't use. So great, here's our blacks, and now what we should have up here, great, here's something in, which is my signature / logo, so I usually always put it as part of a piece. In this case it's kind of mimicking a stem. This is also number 5, so I'm going to throw that in number 5. It can just sit there. Let's see what else we've got that we can turn on. So we've got a couple of bats which aren't interacting with anything, so you can see that they're sitting by themselves, so they're not overlapping, so they're very easily, I can just throw them in number 5. I know it's that color value. Also got a couple of bats here. Now some of these do actually interact with our main flower here, so I'm going to use this, which I've left here handy, this mask, and just apply it to these bats, and then we won't have that problem. There we go. You can see there's nothing sitting behind that now. We're happy with that. So that's also going number 5. There's nothing in this as well. This is empty, so we can get rid of that. Just see what that layer mask was, just so I know. Okay, we don't need that. Bin that. So here we go. Here's all our blues, which we will actually just separate as well. You don't need them sitting in one place. So let's take our flowers out of there, and we'll put these into folders as well. So we've got 2, 2, we've got 2, 3, so we'll put that into a folder, label that 3. There we go. There's nothing in that flowers folder, we can get rid of that. So everything's getting a bit more ordered, everything is numbered as it should be. So this is actually technically it's number 6 on our layers. So we've got 5, 6, 4, 3, 2. We're almost there with this, hasn't taken too long. We'll take this mask and we'll drop it into our mask folder. I don't think we need that anymore. Everything seems to be sitting in this folder, so let's take it out of that. Great. What's sitting in here now is this. So same scenario here. Let's just quickly select everything we have here. Let's take it out of these. We don't need it sitting there necessarily. I'm just going to turn a couple of these layers off just to see what else there is here. So in this case, this green sits on top of that, but the problem really is not the green, it's the black. So if I take that off, there's something showing beneath it. So let's select what we have here in number 5. Let's take our main piece here, let's select that, turn that off, and let's select the black that we had here. We don't need that element or here. Great, so now we've got a couple of clean elements. We can just release that clipping mask. So this is our green, which will sit in number 5. This is our black, which will sit over here. And this is our light. We can't see that right now, but we can put that with all the lights that we have here. That'll sit on top. So let's bring all that back in again, so you can see that it's worked. We haven't broken anything. Okay, I must have put something. Okay, that needs to go in that layer. There we go. There we go, that's turned on. Here's our light that we already had on anyway. So great. So that's built up now. So I'm going to quickly do the lights, and then I'm going to do the trapping, which should be pretty much the last part of the process for this particular one. So quick thing to turn on. So there we go, here's our moon. So there's 2 ways that we can do the moon. We can either have white paper and the cream will actually be a ink, or we can do it the other way around. We can have a cream paper and have the white be an overlay of white ink. So the different ways of doing it. So I'm going to leave that as an option and speak to the printer what he suggests is the best way of doing it, because sometimes it's nice to play with different paper textures and colors. So that's something that I'll talk to the printer about, but it's very simple in what it is, because it's either going to be printed right at the bottom anyway, or it's something, all the creams will be printed first, so it won't make a difference either way. So we can leave that and turn that on now. Next, okay, we've gotten there, so let's do all our lights now. So let's turn on all our light layers that we have, and that really, like, to be honest, brings a piece to life. Is like the big difference that makes from it being quite flat to all this extra detail that we've currently got because of that layer. So let's just duplicate that folder, because we're going to make a mask as always. Here we go. Let's make sure all that is actually whites and not the creams. So let's color overlay. Let's turn that into white. There you go. So you can see all that detail there. So let's create that and actually make that into a mask now. Let's just reverse it. So now we've got it to do what we want it to do, which is everything which is black which will knock out everything else. So there's our mask. So we can select very easily on top of this black layer, because it should take away from everything there. Take it there. Here's our greens. Let's put the same mask on here, and there you go. And that's our lights done. So if I put this back, So there might be a few places where, okay, let's do some tweaks if it hasn't worked exactly or there's something missing. So as you can see there, we're getting, now that I've added that mask, we're seeing through these petals, which normally should be white, and we're seeing our flower. So we're going to have to add a mask or just take away from this particular area, so we're not seeing that through. So that's one of the things. It's like, okay, sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes you get little things like this, which aren't a big deal, but it's something to fix, and hence why you always have that layer on top, which shows you what it should look like. So let's go and select our greens. And let's select what we need. So let's see, which layer is this from? Because then we can select it. Let's deselect that. Show which one of these greens actually has. Here we go. That's the one that has the petals. So let's select these petals. There we go. Everything. Yeah, that's going to fix everything we need it to. So let's invert that selection. We'll put that black back. We'll turn the black off for now, but let's just see where it's interacting and anything that we'd rather keep. So one of the things, what's going to happen, like if I just delete this from here, you'll see something. I'll do that on that particular blue anyway. Where's the base blue? That is our base blue. Oh, we can take away from a couple of these as well. So let's select that selection as well. Let's take it away from there, and we've got two versions of this particular one here and this particular one here. Now that might seem, see what we're getting here, see that little line there. Now if ever our screens are slightly misaligned, that's where we're going to see breaks of white, which we don't want in this scenario, especially around some of these edges. So this is why trapping is very important, just because a way of testing is if you get a layer and you move it by a pixel, if you see extra white, you shouldn't. It should allow a bit of misalignment by a pixel or two. So you want to always have a bit of, like, especially have colors overlapping. So this is one of those scenarios where you want to do that. So I'm going to go back, and everything I cleared I'm going to take away from. So this is our current selection. So I'm going to go to our selection tool, and I'm going to contract that by, let's say, 2 pixels. So the selection is now smaller by 2 pixels, which is great because that's going to give me my breathing room in those places. So we'll go back in here, take away from here, from these layers as well, all our number 3s and our number 4s in this case. Great. So we've done that. We can bring this back, and now we don't have that problem. We've got a slight bit here, but it's not what it used to be. So I can just go in and slightly erase here by hand if I feel it's a little too much and encroaching on that space, but that's gonna be fine. So the other little thing we're going to do now, because some of these masks are great, but they're very precise in what they're doing, and once again we want to have that room for if something just like that, say if that's, I've just moved it by 1 pixel and we've got this slight tear, so we're going to fix that around these edges. So let's select our flower. This is everything. So we're going to go in, let's stick a layer on top of that. Now we're going to expand our selection by, let's say, 2 pixels. Give ourselves some breathing room here. We've selected, and we're going to select our color that we have. This is our base blue, which is right here. We're going to select a very clean brush because we want to be precise with this and not allow any texture. Now, easy way of doing this and way to see is, let's turn off all this blue. Here we go. We've selected our new layer. Let's turn that off as well. Everywhere that we've got basically this green, we can add this blue in. This is like a very quick way of doing it. I mean, there are other ways you can do it a bit more precisely, but this is just working for this particular one very easily. So we're going to add this in here, and this is going to give us our bleed for where basically that blue interacts with our green and our blacks. We're only going along the lines that it actually interacts with, but everywhere that it's not, like right here we can see we don't need it there because of our selection, so we're just going to finish it there. We'll follow it back up here and put this, we'll put it back in. There's different ways to do this. You can go into the layer and actually add basically just a stroke to it. if it was all the way around, that would, and then you can take away from that stroke afterwards by rasterizing that stroke. But because there's only a few elements that this is interacting with, so I'm just doing it manually. But I generally would use like the stroke tool, well, the stroke option in layers, to do this in one go if it was definitely all the way around and interacting with colors. There we go. So we're almost there. Almost there. Almost there. There we go. So that's everywhere it's interacting with. That's brilliant. We can now put those twos in one layer because there's two iterations of that. That's it, 2. Now then there's the test. So let's select that back. So if I move this out of kilter by a pixel, we should see there's no tear there now. Even if I move by 2, there's still no tear. And that's what you really want. You want to allow that level of, you know, just in case something happens with your screens, they're not going to be 100% perfect. Well, like 1 or 2 pixels isn't a big deal, but you just got to factor that into your artwork. So that's trapping. That's the main thing what trapping does. And I'm just going to check the chat. What resolution are you working at here? I'm working at 300 DPI with this particular piece. What is the document the same size? Yeah, so I would say, yeah, your document needs to be the same size in the sense of like inches or centimeters, but you can pump up your resolution. Like sometimes I work at 400 to 500 DPI. It allows me to draw in a bit more detail, but the actual page is actually the same size. So if I just go to, here you go, if you just go to the images, so like I'm looking at pixels here, but this is 18 by 24, this piece of art, and it's 300 DPI. Next question. I think before you suggested doing a similar piece for The Dark Knight. Yeah, care to tease what your plan is to use the key elements? Yeah, so this is the first piece in the series that's coming out. I am planning to do a piece for The Dark Knight in the same style. I don't want to use too much just because I haven't submitted it. It hasn't gone past everything at the moment. But it's going to be in the same style in sense it's very minimal. I'm going for like a piece that has, you know, it's not necessarily explosions, everything else, but it definitely speaks of the film. But in the same style. So just think of things that could be subtle that kind of point to the film. But there's definitely bats in there, hidden in there somewhere as well. I'll say that much. Yeah, that should be enough. That should be enough for everyone. Okay, so let's see. Let's turn on that blue. We've done that. Let's turn on our greens. We're missing a green here somewhere. Here we go. I thought something was missing. There we go. There's our green. And I'm just going to check that. See, we're missing highlights here. So over here, there's highlights missing off this second plant. So either I deleted a layer by mistake, which is fine because I did a save as for this piece anyway. But they appear to be missing somewhere. So lights. There's no other lights there. See, there was something missing there. Okay, so we've probably got it somewhere, unless I deleted it, but that's fine. I can always bring it back from the original art file. Because the first thing I generally do when I'm going to start converting a art file into a print file is I delete, or I do a save as, so I don't lose anything from that base file, and then I delete all the redundant layers, like, you know, all my sketch layers and everything else that I've bought in that I don't need. They get deleted, so I have a smaller file to work with. Who are you printing with? Do you have face printing house to work with? A fave. Do I have a fave printing house? This particular one is going to Valhalla. I've worked with quite a few of the guys. I've worked with Valhalla. I've worked with D&L. I've worked with Lady Laz. I've worked with White Duck in the UK. I've worked with VG Kids a lot as well. The last few prints that I've done have been with Valhalla. And they're all great, to be honest. You get used to who you're working with, and they get used to your artwork and how you set it up. So you have this kind of relationship between them. So I wouldn't say I favor one or the other, but I generally know what I'm getting from one particular printer. So I will like adjust my artwork and my dithers accordingly. So I don't want to say who my favorite is because they've all produced really great work. But the people that I've probably worked closest with, like back and forth, have recently been Valhalla, and it's been VG Kids. In a sense, there's been a lot of back and forth in a positive way that we've tweaked the artwork to make it the best possible. So yeah, current favorites, let's say that. Okay, I'm gonna find that missing file, I think, unless I've deleted it, and if I have, then it's fine. I can bring it back from like my previous art file. So I'm not too fussed, but it's like it'll be the same process. I'm just gonna add a layer mask on top of those 2 levels, and it'll take away from there. So it's no biggie really. And just see that it's not a redundant file sitting around here anyway. So what probably happened? There's our greens. We don't need that. There's our unmask, so I'll throw that into my mask folder. Cool. I hope you're doing well, James. Congrats on the launch of the gallery. Exciting stuff ahead, mate. Let's see what else we've got. Any layers that I don't need that I can just delete now is basically what I'm looking at. So I don't need that. Just make sure everything got used that should have. There's mask. And here we go. Just here's the text. So generally what I do with text, here's all my text layers. I'll convert these to shapes just in case the printer doesn't have those particular fonts and so forth. It's just a pain in the ass for them to look for them, so I'll convert them into shapes. They're all number 5 in this sense, so I'll just throw them in the number 5 folder, and they're positioned where they need to be. Great, number 5 is done. That's all my text elements. I can get rid of this folder now. No need for it. So I'm just seeing what's inside there. These were whites, so I must have deleted it, but I'll bring it back just before I send it to printers anyway. So these are all my white layers, so I'll delete that for now. I don't need that. Here's my base piece, so that's close enough into what it needs to be. You will see a slight little dither change. It's not going to be 100% because I changed a few things, so my whites show up a bit cleaner here on actually my screen printing file compared to what the original piece was, because they're a bit too close together and you wouldn't see that detail. So I've adjusted a few things there. And I've just brought in a bit more of the white detail here just to separate those elements as well. So what I generally do is I leave this on, and I turn it off and on and look at all the edges, make sure everything that should be there is there. It should be the last thing you really do. You can always go back to your previous file and bring in a layer if you're missing anything. If anything's broken, just give it a once over. Generally a printer will probably send you a mock-up version, and when that's usually just a PDF to show what they've done with it. And you can just I generally go through it this close and look at all the details, make sure like the dithering and everything's in place, all the textures are as they should be, there's nothing cut off, or if my mistake, I've missed something on the art file. So you go through that. So that's the art file. So yeah, I usually keep my swatches in there so it's easy for them to find them. I usually keep the flattened original file, and I'll name that flat artwork, so they've got it there to refer to as well. So we've got our swatches, we've got our flat artwork. Let's delete everything that we don't need in this case. Well, we'll keep our mask. I always keep that underneath as a base piece, but let's just show you how this builds up as a screen print. So here's our base paper. In this case, we've got our whites. Here's an empty, here you go, empty folder, there we go. Then we've got our blue, slightly darker blue, even darker blue. We've got our greens, and then we've got our blacks, and that's our final layer. So that's our screen print. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 color screen print. And that did that in about just over an hour-ish. So this is quite a simple piece. That's why I picked this one to do for the stream. Otherwise, I wanted to be quite quick, just so it doesn't get too boring, because sometimes these things can take hours to days, depending how complex the piece is and how much setup I've done previously when working on the art piece. Luckily, this one wasn't too complex, so it was quite quick. I do need to fix that little element with the whites on this, which I'll do later before I send it to printers. But yeah, there we go. That's screen printing. If anyone wants to ask me any questions in the meantime, you can catch me on either Twitter, Instagram, or my Facebook group. So give us a follow there if you have any more questions about screen printing. More than happy to give you a run through on that. So thank you very much, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll try and do a few more of these if there's anything else that you'd like me to do a show and tell for. Thank you. Let's turn this up.